Are we live? Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies as much as they love watching them. And honestly, perhaps a little more. Let me get my we got a great show for you tonight, folks. Let me get my, let me see if I can even find my show notes. Oh, there we are. Drag them over. Yeah. Tonight, my good friend Jim Chaboyko and I are going to overanalyze the latest multiverse, I'm so sorry, spiderverse picture, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Boy, oh boy, that's a lot of hyphens. But first, let's bring on my co-host with the most. And Jim, let's talk about the French Connection and censorship.
Certainly.
Certainly.
Say, Disney, how do you breathe life back into a 50-year-old movie? But anyhow, by partially destroying it.
I believe one of the critics called it corporate vandalism. Folks, let me give you the let's you know what, Jim, we're going to jump over to another screen. Let's talk about Dan Murrell, a guy I both love and am infuriated by, but I am totally with him on this time. He does a regular streaming charts kind of breakdown of what's going on in the streaming scene, and he decided to start his latest Best Picture winner streamer censored for streaming. Who censored it? And Jim, he really does a great breakdown of this story, which is The French Connection, an early 70s movie, Oscar winner, directed by William Friedkin, starring Roy Scheider and, of course, Gene Hackman as the Popeye Doyle. Really a modernization of the hard-boiled detective kind of thriller, bit of action, great film. It was censored. There's a period where Popeye Doyle, who even in Gene Hackman's words, he was uncomfortable in using the N-word, but he, in the end, only fought it a little because he's like, this is who this character is. He's a bigot. Anyway, they cut out this piece, but only for North American audiences. And only on the streaming services, of course, owned by Disney. And I'm wondering, what did you think about? What do you think about that? What are your thoughts?
It's really just a couple of seconds. This isn't excusing it. It's a couple of seconds that they shave off the scene where he sort of casually tosses out an Italian
slur.
A reference slur to Italian people, and another one to African Americans. And he just, part of it is, and I think it comes fairly early in the movie.
Yes,
I just
it
actually
does.
watched this within the last couple of years again, separate from this show. We haven't done this one, but it's just a little. It's a few seconds, but it's a few seconds that go towards establishing the character of Popeye, that he's that kind of guy. And I'm glad they included that interview with Hackman because he seems thoughtful about it. It doesn't seem performative or that he's trying to be.
Ooh, I get to say a bad word.
Yeah.
So, even in the early 70s, people were like, this is not a thing that I might have used casually 10 years ago. Is not a thing to use anymore.
And Hackman is no shrinking violet. He's like a tough guy in real life too, when presented with a challenge. So that was kind of interesting to see. But I think, largely it's the principle. I was thinking about this earlier today, that, I think people treat different kinds of art differently. They would, where they might edit a few seconds off a movie, or they might re-release a book with different changes, a la Roald Dahl, or they might, beep some words out of a song. Would you ever touch a painting? Would you ever take a painting and alter it? And that's sort of, it's art, like movies are art, but would you do that? I don't think anybody in their right mind would, unless you're like Ron DeSantis or something. But you might cover up
bowdlerization.
David or something.
It's really bowdlerization. This is great art, but let's modify it to within an inch of its life.
Yeah.
Gutted of all context and meaning. And it is interesting. I mean, especially when you think about another film which was always, let's say, if not always, should have always been controversial, Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
And I think rightly so. They're like, okay, you can watch this movie. Please note, and not in some, not a trigger warning. It's just, listen, it's got X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. If you want more context, go here. You are given a heads up. And I think that's what Dan, Mr. Merle here, in full awesome rant, right there.
Yeah.
right there. Is basically, that's kind of the thrust of his argument, Jim, is that there should be maybe a disclaimer, a note, a context thing, but even more so, going back to your comment about art, what's interesting, and Roy Scheider, I'll put a link to Dan's full story. He does his research. Yeah. He clips some interesting interviews, and not just Gene's, but Roy Scheider, who says he's in a theater with a lot of black people who cheer at that, because here is a big picture mainstream film where white cops say that. They all knew they were racist, but here is a movie acknowledging that casual racism of the police and how thrilled black audiences were to see. It's like, how did Scheider's like, we all knew Whitey was out to get us, but look, even Whitey knows. Yeah. And I think that's why it's important to understand the context of which a movie is made, and that Popeye Doyle is never in the film presented as, what a great guy. Here's a neighbor you want. It's like, no, he's a bastard. He may be on the good guy side, but he's a prick,
And he's reckless too. The film ends with a sort of you don't know what happens, but there's this sort of gunshot, and you're like, somebody got it. I'm not sure. It's yeah. So yeah. I mean, it goes a way to establishing who this guy is. It's kind of a tricky one. The two things I wanted to note here is I know whoever did it was trying to do it under the radar. And has subsequently failed. Dan Merle went around and looked for an unedited version and couldn't even find one on the Criterion channel, which is sort of chilling. The other thing too is, but it was so artlessly done. I remember, quick aside, when I lived in Japan, they tried to show Shogun in 2 hours. It was a 6-hour miniseries, and they actually cut this guy walking down the path 3 times just to get him there. And it was like that. Like, it was like somebody took an old school razor blade and cut the film and then just pieced it together. It's artlessly done, number one. Number two, the fact this has geographical boundaries, for North American audiences and not the UK and Europe. Yeah. That, I think, you can look at what's happening in the States with various laws with trans people and that kind of thing. Is there going to be a Florida version of the French Connection at one point? If they don't like what's in there, you can see this. I mean, this is the worst case scenario, absolutely. But those are a couple of the things that I was thinking of.
I had it up on the screen briefly, but I think it's important to read it all the way through. This is the email that Dan found in his research regarding the French Connection. Let's get that up on the screen again. So Criterion is just a bunch of bureaucratic weaseling here. We do not censor any content presented on Criterion Channel, though in some instances we include a content warning in the description of select films. We also frequently present films in director's cuts and other alternate versions as their makers and our licensors may require. The French Connection is a 20th Century Fox film title that we have under license from Disney, its current owners. This is the only version that has ever been available to us for streaming in North America, because Dan was able to get it unbowdlerized when he did a VPN thing for the UK. All right. Yeah. The question you raised has come up when we have played the film in the past. So they've known this is a thing. Yeah. And here, this is my favorite part. And according to our licensor, this is a director's edit of the film. I mean, Dan was, you could hear him wanting to roll his eyes. It's hard for him to keep focused on the screen, Jim, in this. And folks, you're watching... You see this in replays. I will. I'll pin a link to this one. Watch that piece.
Yeah, absolutely worth it.
But
the other thing
he does. He's he can't imagine Friedkin doing that. Has found nothing where it says he did. And honestly, yeah, you can hear finkiness in this corporate email. Well, a director's edit, not a director's cut, which you always make a big deal about. The director's edit. Well, that's what they told us. It's just such a rat-fink way of dealing with it. Yeah. Just so weaselly. Well, we were told. That's what we were told.
Yeah. And the other point...
What is he, a Trump lawyer?
The other point...
I was told there was no secret documents around.
That I thought was germane was that he talked a little bit about the responsibility of the licensor, and the
Disney
taking care of something,
which is definitely the one who went, look through everything.
Let's make Popeye Dolan nicer, or I don't know. Maybe he'll get dressed by woodland creatures in the morning or something.
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's just such a finky thing to do. And yes, it also, because it is a subtle change. You might just see a weird cut. If you hadn't seen the original version, you might just see a weird cut. That's interesting. And Dan raises a great point about this kind of pernicious, behind the scenes kind of censorship is, you don't even know what happened.
Yeah.
And that when the licensor is doing that strictly for the mood of the time, all of a sudden meaning can be lost. This edit takes away meaning, takes away character. All of a sudden, Popeye Doll isn't as much of a nasty piece of work. But that certainly wasn't Friedkin. It wasn't in there for laughs.
No.
It was important.
Friedkin's sort of a notorious guy himself. I'm surprised he hasn't marched down to the studio with a samurai sword himself and
done something crazy.
had a little chat with people. I mean, I think he's in his 90s, but he's renowned for carrying, I think, either him or Milius or both of them, have been known to carry guns and things like that. So I don't know if I'd be wanting to, freehand edit.
That could have also been one of the reasons Hackman only kind of fought it. It's would you want me to go up against that maniac?
We took the bridge scene out of Sorcerer, so I hope you don't mind, Bill. It just made me uncomfortable. The bridge lobby didn't like it.
All right, Jim, we should move forward, but first, let's say hello. Somebody in the chat. We have, looks like Walt65. Oh, and
hello.
Walt has notes regarding this very subject. Let's, nice. I'm going to read them to you, folks. Okay, Gene Hackman hated the character and had to be convinced to do it. Of course, some people liked that. I recall a gag in Lonely Guy when a lonely cop asks about the Doyle cardboard stand-up. Oh, yeah. Many of the early Scorsese movies are packed with racist stuff that are true to the time and the characters. We'll have a version in which Doyle was a lonely little kid who isn't really such a bad kid, and as is done for classic villains. You know what? Somebody wants to make another movie, Jim, Walt. I'm okay with them trying to retcon, and even just to provide context on why they are the way they are. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Changing that thing, though, in that sleazy kind of way, like not even put an edit, like listen, there's some parts here where like we no longer are comfortable with characters saying,
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of N-words have been dropped, in the history of American film. So.
Well, but even where does that stop? I was thinking about, that well-known racist Ava DuVernay, known white supremacist.
Yes.
I mean, she has a scene. I mean, the word is said a lot in Selma, in the film she wrote. Yeah. She made Selma, but it had no more impact when LBJ and Wallace in the Oval Office, and LBJ, I think it's an apocryphal, I think it's one of those things, the meeting never happened, or that isn't quite it, but it kind of true to who these people were. Mm-hmm. And there's LBJ saying to Wallace, George, why can't you just let the N-words vote? Couldn't you just do that? And it's like, it hits. It hits, you're gutted. Mm-hmm. And of course, Wallace being the piece of...
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim, I have a button for this that I should use. A piece of that he was, racist piece of he was. Of course, now I can't. All smarmy and punchable face.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Anyway, Blazing Saddles, notwithstanding the racists now say can't make a movie like that anymore. It's like, why? The job was done. You don't need to make a Blazing Saddles now. It's like it wouldn't make sense now. But again, another known white supremacist, Richard Pryor, who wrote it with Mel Brooks, was hammered Mel Brooks. Every N-word the white people say makes Cleavon Little's, the sheriff, the hero, his victory all the greater. And so it was important to Pryor that they did, even though Mel Brooks was like, this is I'm not comfortable with this. And I think that's kind of the point here, is why are you doing it? So that it's not about African Americans who are going, wow, a cop used the N-word? What a shocker. It's about white people not being comfortable with it and not being reminded of this. And that I think is, so it's a kind of weird sort of, the taking it out is it's sort of no, we need to have this fantasy about ourselves that we're different now, or it wasn't that bad, or whatever. Sorry, Jim, you were going to say?
I was just going to say there's sort of a weirder, quite a weird example of this. Netflix plays Community, the sitcom, except for the Dungeons and Dragons episode, because Chang is dressed as a drow elf in it. And that's technically, I guess his face is black, but it's not a reference to African Americans or
although they were
else,
kind of playing with that too.
Yeah, well,
because the other kids, that's
while.
racist, and it's like, what? I'm this, and I kind of think it's sort of the way 30 Rock will do it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
and there's some of it. It's like I'm always uncomfortable in those. It's like, are you just trying to slip in that gag and hide it behind something?
Yeah, I think that some of those are not available. Like that,
they just took them off.
They're not in syndication. Yeah, that's right too. I forgot about that.
But some of those, it's like, I'm not saying it's right to take them off. I could, though, see the filmmakers themselves going, yeah, okay, sure, that may not have been my best moment. Walt 65, one last point before we move forward, Jim. Walt 65 says, one last point. Connection was cut by Friedkin himself, apparently, removing brutality on a sex worker by the French killer. Apparently it was a very nasty scene. I'm going to have to look that up. Not to see the grotesque assault on a poor sex worker, but to see, to dig into that. Who knows? Maybe this was a director's edit. I don't think so, though. Something stinks about it.
It's badly done,
Yeah.
So. But,
all right, folks. Okie doke. Let's move forward. Let's get back to the movie we're talking about today. And
the French Connection.
Here, I got to find my notes again. Where the heck are those notes? Oh, here we are. Here we are. All right. Back to the flick at hand, everybody. Here we are. We're looking at Spider-Man Across the Spiderverse, and here in one of the most misleading log lines I have read to date, courtesy of IMDb. Miles Morales catapults across the multiverse, where he encounters a team of spider people charged with protecting its very existence. When the heroes clash on how to handle a new threat, Miles must redefine what it means to be a hero. A hero, Jim.
A hero.
Yes, a hero. Mr. Chaboyko.
Yeah.
Why don't you,
Oh, yeah.
Tell us who's in this flick.
We should talk about who is involved. Well, we have three directors. We have Joaquim Dos Santos, Kemp Powers, and Justin K. Thompson. That's written by Lord and Miller, that you might know from the Lego movies, as well as somebody, Dave Callahan, starring Shamik Moore, Haley Steinfeld. I always feel like I'm saying her name wrong. Brian Tyree Henry, Luna Lauren Velez, Jake Johnson, of course, Jason
of course
Schwartzman as Spot, Issa Rae, Karan Soni, who I believe is the South Asian Spider-Man, Shea Wiggum, old character actor, as well as Greta Lee, Daniel Kaluuya, Mahershala Ali. Am I saying that right? And then, of course, my daughter's favorite, Oscar Isaac. Amongst a great many others. So,
remarkable
big
voice cast. Big cast. So, Jim, before we get into the spoiler zone, I've already done, and I'll put a link to it here, the very short version, my less than 1 minute review was a soft see it. Thought about it a bit more and thought to myself, you know what? Maybe it is, Jim, maybe it is a full see it. or a more of a solid see it. I went and saw it again Friday night, actually. And I've gone back to it's a soft see it for me. But why don't you tell us what your impressions are? What your spoiler-free impressions?
Yeah, I mean, it's a see it, and I'd say it's a hearty see it. It's number 2 of a decent of a series that started off pretty well, won an Oscar, but this one I found maybe a little. I mean, there's a few things a little bit overlong, a little too much sort of parental tension, but I thought the style again was captivating. And the characters were interesting. It was almost overstuffed, so it's something that I would have to see again. Probably not, at some point later in the summer, if you get a crappy rainy day or something, be a perfect idea. But yeah, we'll get into it. But I thought it was a pretty good see it. I did like the first one better. We can talk about that as we go on.
I guess that does mean, you know what? Here I am. I'm like losing my. Well, where do I go with that?
Summer brain.
Summer brain. Thank you. I think this is where I go with that. Into the spoiler zone. That's right, everybody.
Character or
Jim,
what have you?
Because I'm a big F up.
Uh-oh.
I haven't even been recording this. I've had you muted.
Oh, well, I think Walt hadn't mentioned it.
Yeah, but I think I did it after the fact.
Oh.
Because I was pressing buttons. Dragon Movie Guy's here. First of all, that's a round of applause for Dragon Movie Guy in the chat. And apparently, Flawed Masterpiece is his adult film stage name. Great senior, DMG. And many thanks for referencing about the muting thing. I'm going to ask the question again.
Sure.
And I'll do the magic of editing later.
Sure, yeah. I also neglected to tell you remind you to unmute me, so that's my fault too.
I really just hope I didn't unmute you when we're talking about Freed King. That would bum me the out. Richard, anyway. Oh, yeah, DMG only muted the last 2 minutes. Okay, let's get back to your genius.
Sure.
You're a genius, Jim. Regarding this, what is a flawed masterpiece? Can something be called a flawed masterpiece? And if you can call something a flawed masterpiece, is this it? And I will start you off with saying you had said something to the effect of masterpiece is a word thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
Back to you, Mr. Chboyko.
It's one of those words like sexy or, is used entirely too much. Yeah, I would reserve masterpiece for like a movie that you see maybe, once every 5 years you see a movie you're just like, fuck, like, that District 9 for me would be one, for instance. The Flaw, that's probably a personal designation. I had probably been muted during this part, but there's an old Frasier line where Frasier and Niles are coming back from dinner. They said, well, the first 3 courses were great, but I thought the dessert cart was a little lacking. And he said, you know what's the best part of that? He said, having the perfect meal and having one flaw that you can talk about for the rest of the evening. And so I'm paraphrasing really badly, but that was sort of the gist of it. I love that joke. It's, and I know I'm quoting Frasier, but it's such a great joke.
But I think that goes to the heart of this. That is a great joke, but there's some truth in that.
Yeah. So, masterpiece, I wouldn't say that for this movie. I might have said it for
flawed
the first
or
one.
otherwise.
Yeah, I should really watch. I watched some recaps, but I should really watch the first one again. We have a copy in the house for crying out loud, but it's been a busy
uncensorable.
Yeah. But yes, exactly. We have a physical copy. So yeah, but so flawed masterpiece. I think that's probably a personal designation. I think we have examples of it in our own lives. It was great except for this one thing. Maybe you're able to overlook that one thing. It could be a fantastic sports game or a great book or
Yeah.
or. So, yeah.
Well, for reasons we'll get into later. For myself, this is not a flawed masterpiece. Although there was the potential for a masterpiece in what's a pretty solid flick.
Yeah.
I do love your definition, though, Jim. Otherwise perfect, but there was this thing that kind of pokes you in the eye. It doesn't ruin it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about Avengers Infinity War, where I think that was I'm not saying it was great, but it was a solid flick where the ending wrecks it. The no stakes ending kind of leaves just such a bad taste in my mouth. But there are better films where it's like, boy, this thing just keeps it from greatness. Here, I'm like, there's potential for greatness, but it would have to have changed like half the movie to reach that for me.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this then. Of course, if anyone wants to comment on that in the chat, DMG, Walt65, feel free to. And this may be getting into the world of, let's say themes or the world of flaws. In the thumbnail I use, here, let's get that up on the big screen here. You can see there in the thumbnail, I'm like, whose story is this anyway? Jim, when I watched this film, and it has this kick-ass start.
Yeah.
Like, really, just a solid start with Gwen Stacy, Gwenda. You get her backstory. You kind of leave with her, and then, hey, let's do that. Literally putting, Jim, how do they like to put it? Putting a lampshade on it. Putting a lampshade on. Well, we'll just do all that over again. And here's another intro. Who's this movie about? Who's the real protagonist?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that
because we start twice.
Yeah.
Gwen Stacy, and then I don't want to give you the middle. Gwen, and then Miles.
Yeah. The intro. Okay, I'm going to use a little bit of an analogy.
Please do.
In the NHL this year in hockey, what usually happened was that they really lean on one goaltender for 75-80% of the games. They use the star goaltender, and they have a backup that usually plays the remainder, comes in to sub for the main goalie if that guy's having a bad night. What a lot of teams started doing this year is having goaltending more of a tandem, kind of a sort of a little bit of a new wrinkle on it. So they would each, for a little while anyway, they would each share, say, 10 or 15 games before the coach chose one person to sort of carry the team for the rest of the season. And this was seen in several different cities. So it's sort of like that to me, that's the sort of, when you had asked that, is the first thing that I thought of was this tandem goaltending. I think it's an attempt, and I don't think it's Weasley. I don't think they can't make up their minds. I think it's a genuine kind of, they're working, and I'm not saying they got their idea from the NHL, but it's a genuine kind of sharing of responsibility almost. They do some pretty interesting things in this movie. And I think that's one of them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I for myself, I think it's the problem, actually, the biggest problem with it. It's why the first half of the film stops, seems kind of disjointed. You're like, where are we going here? What are we doing? And this is also where you see the seeds of greatness. It's just not the right soil. Mm-hmm. If we add more of Gwen Stacy, or heck, really be gutsy, really take a big swing and say, this is the Gwen Stacy picture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another option, yeah.
Or, foreshadowing here, like another movie where they separate the characters and they have their own kind of adventures. But I think here, where you get this killer start, real high stakes, you're engaged with the character, and then let's go back to the not even the laughs, the teen troubled Miles Morales in his lovely home. They even do it's a great bit in the film where the guidance counselor is trying to slap a narrative on these folks to help Miles with college applications. And an immigrant family. I moved here from Puerto Rico. It's part of the United States. Yeah. Poor and struggling. We own a flat in Brooklyn. I'm going to be a captain next week. Like, it's a great little scene, right? And
Rachel Dratch from SNL.
Yes, and she does a great job, and she's ignoring him not because it's like I'm in my own world, but ignoring him because it's like, I'm trying to help your kid get into a great college afterwards. So we do things here. Yeah. This is like, anyway, hired me for a reason, or I know how to package your boy to move forward. But then make that movie. And that's okay. And they could keep some of the key plot points, some of the key ideas, you bet. Or give me the Gwen Stacy, and all the other action points can happen. You can still have the same killer ending, the same twists. But, if we saw more of Gwen, then we see more of how she's kind of keeping something from Miles. We can see it more secretive, and then we can see it hit Miles through her eyes, that betrayal, even though she's sweet on him or connected to him in a way that she isn't with the punk rock guy who's just so awesome, voiced by Dan Kaluuya. Like, it... and that's where I think they kind of, by trying to make everybody happy, notwithstanding one of the key themes of the film, I think really the biggest swing they take, because they're trying to keep too many people happy, they missed a huge opportunity, and it's written in that first act. And a part of me is kind of wondering, I'd love to see some of the early drafts of the script, because maybe it was in there, and then somebody said, "Oh, we need more Miles. We need more Miles. We need more Miles." And all of a sudden, you get a first half of the film that should have been a first third, and more Gwen and less Miles. Mm-hmm. More of the movie from her perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the funny thing is that they had that entire section on Gwen and the fight with the vulture, which was awesome and wonderfully drawn, in the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And then the credits rolled. It was sort of like, 20 minutes in. Yeah. And then it's like Spider-Man, and then all the titles came up.
Which is fine. Lots of films do that.
Yeah. But because this movie it's probably more of an old person's complaint than the ones of those kids. So much had happened in that movie. I had to actually go, I really like that first scene, that first fight, the first set piece. What was it again? I remember really liking it, and I had to physically Okay.
And it has
like,
real emotional heft.
New York. It was a museum.
Like
Guggenheim.
big emotional heft.
Yeah.
Like,
and nicely presented and everything. But I had actually
imagine if you
buried
cut
under
to
the rubble of the
what
rest
if we heard about Spot and Miles Morales? And I think that's another problem is they shift. There's a shift in tone that doesn't match later shifts in tone.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where then we cut to New York and where Gwen shows up and Miles has to say, I'm already in trouble with my folks. Let me tell you about this villain of the week. And we could have seen that in flashback, but we're still in Gwen's story and seeing it through her eyes. DMG, who's recently seen it, he says, I like this fic, but it was so freaking slow. Which is weird for a fast-paced visual film. Somehow they managed to do both at the same time. Well, I think that first half is what does it.
Magic.
DMG, Haley Stanfield was great as Gwen Stacy. She somehow didn't sound like herself, but still sounded natural without changing her accent or anything. Absolutely. It was you know what? I'm wondering, I'll say this to DMG and to you, Jim, ask you both this question about that and Haley Stanfield, and you don't need to answer right away. Is part of that because we just haven't seen enough and heard enough from Haley Stanfield where we kind of know her verbal mannerisms.
Yeah, I had to be reminded. I try this out with myself when there's a commercial on TV and I try to identify if it's Kiefer Sutherland or Will Arnett or whoever, and it's usually, or narrators of PBS shows they often use. Giamatti did a thing, Woodpeckers, the whole story. Not kidding about that title. Anyway, and on it, he had to say, sometimes the woodpecker's nest gets invaded by things like the great tit, which is a kind of a bird, but he can, anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought she did a great job, but I kept on forgetting it was her, frankly, and which is not a bad thing. I mean, you sort of want to go in, you want to accept the character without sort of immediately identifying them.
Well, let me propose this to you. Like in DMG kind of hits on some of the points I'm hitting on. Part of the reason you disappear is because the Gwen Stacy storyline and her conflict is the most interesting part of the film. I am now reminded of some of my feelings about Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which, although if I compare the two, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is the stronger film, but it also has this, it's trying to handle two protagonists and how I was immediately more engaged with Rocket's storyline. You know?
I was funny. It's funny. I was thinking of that movie too today. I was like, how do what did it was? Feels like it was 6 months ago. It was probably 8 weeks, but I was like, how did we think? I liked that, didn't I? But in any case,
it's still high up in my esteem. This one, well, we'll see, right? I still said see it. It is definitely a theatrical spectacle, at times beautiful, but okay. So let me ask you this now. I'd mentioned it before, but what film does this remind you of more? Avengers: Infinity War or Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back? And look, I wrote a note saying I'd probably ask you this earlier. I didn't.
That's okay. Probably Empire, because I just, the ending of the Avengers movie there was sort of like do you remember, I used to get sour burps, if you ever got that. It was like a real acidic taste.
Yes. Little acid comes up in your...
Yeah, and I haven't had one of those for years, touch wood. They were gross and painful, and that's sort of like, that the ending of that movie for me was like a big sour burp, and we just went, ugh, happy summer, and it was such a downer. And on a couple levels, but Empire managed to be hopeful and scary and have consequence, and it felt
real
like
stakes.
and it felt like the ending of the second part. I mean, when there was all the fight, and everything had calmed down, and Luke was on the hospital ship, and that felt, and meanwhile, poor Han is frozen in
Carbonite.
That's
Carbonite.
But it felt like a little bit of a coda, I guess, like a denouement, or a temporary denouement, and that was
frozen in carbonite.
Oh, really blowing the FX budget today. But anyway, yeah. So I think closer to Empire for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that's, I think, the heart of the masterpiece this could have been. Mm-hmm. By the end of it, I'm in it, and when she and folks, you're in the spoiler zone. Not my fault if you're watching this, even though you haven't seen it. At the end, where she gets her team together just about to jump into another world to rescue Miles, who, if you look at props character archetypes, Miles has always been the princess in this flick. In this one, he is the princess. He is the one to be saved. He is the object, the object of the hero, Gwen Stacy's affections. Mm-hmm. Die on that hill. And it brings it home. Like there's an emotional hit. There's real stakes because you still got the spot that we have to worry about. That's the threat to the Morales family. Well, he's on the world, in the universe that he shouldn't be in, but the spider that originally bit him from, and she's got to go save him, and then meanwhile come back to save the Morales family. There's stakes galore, and there are real emotional costs, and it wasn't free to get there, and you still have the Spider Society or whatever the hell. Like, just stakes and conflict and a hero. Again, I'm like, that last scene with her in her hood and she's all like, want to join me? That's fucking thrilling. That is the way you goddamn end on a cliffhanger. Want to join me? And then to be continued. And I'm like, even now I get a little choked up. It's emotionally satisfying. While at the same time, like, when's the next movie?
Exactly.
How long do I have to wait? What the hell? What about me? I don't want to wait that long. I mean, it has been a long time since I've seen the end of a movie where I'm like, well, I need to see this through. I need to see the third movie. I need to see it. I need to have that resolution. I never had that feeling at the end of Avengers Infinity War. I went, well, we all know this is going to play out. I mean, that character's got another movie already announced, so, he ain't dead. Like, just... Yeah.
When Moe on The Simpsons gets his new restaurant, he goes, "My fryers, they can flash fly a buffalo in 15 seconds." Homer says, "But I want it now." Sort of like that. But it's so. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's exactly like Empire Strikes Back, but you have that sort of rise of hope. You have that lull, that calm before the storm, and also. Yeah. I don't think Luke is conscious necessarily at the end but he's learned a thing or two. He's got a few more cards up his sleeve. He's a little wiser, like Miles is in this instance. So you have heroes ascendant and about to,
Well, but I think it's really, again, The Luke in this case is Gwen Stacy. And she, by the end of the movie, has come into her own. She's just got to finish the job.
Yeah.
You know, she started going through a portal, not knowing what to do and not able to do it. She is the character that is totally broken down and gutted. And before her own father, with atonement with the father, like another great heroic trope, a great beat right out of the hero's journey. She is the one I don't know what to do here. You know, I don't know what to do. And he is the one who gives her that gift of connection, and she hugs, and then she goes and she goes to the Morales family and says, "Hey, I'm gonna fix this." And by the end of it, she has totally come into her own as a hero. Capital fucking H. Sorry.
Yeah.
Apologies, Jim. Capital H.
Shocking.
A couple of comments from the Peanut Gallery. DMG, here's an interesting note. He says, oddly, he liked Transformers more than Spidey, although he does allow result of low expectations on Transformers and too high expectations on Spidey. Possibly. Like, yeah, I think that's a pretty good, that's a pretty good.
These days is you get too hyped up and you expect,
greatness.
Comic book Citizen Kane. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He mentioned this, and I agree with him. He did love the Mrs. Chen cameo from Venom in this movie, though, with Spot.
Oh, yeah.
As he's discovering his powers.
Yeah.
Jim, let me, there is like, this movie does have meat. Spot is another character we could almost have like a little sidebar about. So I'm going to kind of leave that alone because I did want to talk to you about some of the themes brought up in this film. And what would you say is the main theme of this flick?
You know what stuck with me was when we were
I'm out of my tea. Speaking of films missing things, what did I not like about? What was the thing? I felt something was missing in that last Ant-Man movie. I'm not sure what it was. Tea left.
The thing that stuck with me, and when we were, I went with my wife and daughter, and we went to see it. My son had already seen it, and what stuck with me was the whole discussion about canon. Like they're actually addressing canon in this, and that you can tie in with fate, and everyone's got their subscribed or prescribed fate, I guess. And Miles at one point says, somebody says, well, you have to have this person, an important person, die on you for you to be able to save the world, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Again, paraphrasing badly. He says, why can't I do both? So it's that sort of, and I guess we'll find out, it's sort of a moving target. I guess we'll find out in the next movie if that's a rejection of fate or just a teenager's overconfidence.
Yeah.
And I think that was an interesting point. And the brilliance of the mechanism of the multiverse, there's two things. Number one, you basically avoid all the mumbo jumbo. There's no objects. There's no glove with the jewels. There's nothing like that. All you're referring to is different dimensions. So that's number one. Number two is that you get to talk about things like canon in real time in the story, which is kind of, have we seen that before? That beautiful shot with sort of multiple spider people hovering over a wounded law enforcement personnel from their life, or authority figure, or Uncle Ben, or what have you. And it's kind of an amazing kind of a visual, and it makes sense thematically too. It's kind of cool. So that's my.
I agree with you 100%. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, I think canon, and not canon as fate, but canon. It's a canon event. You're wrecking
Yes,
canon, which is such a, I think it serves the fate thing, but I think it's really about talking about how these comic book movies, the fandom becomes the thing that dictates what must be in it. Well, this is how Spider-Man works. This is how this character works. There must be this for that to happen. This, therefore, that. And this seems to be kind of a questioning of that, a criticism of that.
Yeah.
Why? Why indeed? And that's a great, even though, I mean, I think certain things should be in Ant-Man, including ex-con security. But this is going at a deeper level about what the audience expectations are, and a great film should be subverting those.
Yeah.
Understanding them, respecting them, but also not wantonly, but breaking them, subverting them, flipping them around, giving us a new experience. Otherwise, it's just the same, the same story we've heard time and time and time again. And I think that is, I mean, there are other things going on. You have almost like a Rick and Morty-esque interdimensional trolley problem. But listen, if you suffer, all these people are saved. As a matter of fact, not just you suffering, but that person dies so others can live. And I guess it's Spider-Man or Spider-Woman or Spider-Bot or all these other Spider-Pig, which I'm so glad at the end of this movie you see he's back.
Yes, yeah.
Because that was a great character.
Oh, yeah.
And Nicolas Cage's Rorschach-y, noir Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So glad they're going to be back. Where was I?
Canon.
Interdimensional trolley problem.
Trolley, yes.
Yes,
Rick and Morty,
where we're kind of presented, but I think that's almost like a bait and switch. Here, look at this thing, when it's not really about that. It's about, like you say, Jim, canon. And fate to a degree, but it's not, I'm destined to do this. No one ever says that. No, there's a canon event. It's very specific. You break canon. Therefore, you break the multiverse. I think the only one that's even come close to really having fun with that, although in a darker kind of way, was the Loki series. With the the bureaucrats of the timeline, the Timeline Authority or whatever the hell they were called, which I also thought was awesome. What about? I mean, there were a couple of other themes going on here. Sure. Parental expectations. Yeah. But I don't know, Jim. I thought that was one of the weakest parts of the storyline was the parental expectations of the Morales family on Miles Morales. It's like they love him. He knows it. Like it's just kind of.
Yeah, been there, done that.
For whatever, it didn't work for me.
Yeah. It's sort of one of those things that we've seen, time and time again. The funny thing is you have, let your imagination run free. We have all these dimensions and all these creatures. Let's spend 20 minutes on father-son hostility. And, it's just like...
Honestly, barely hostile.
Yeah, no, that's sort of the wrong word, but tension, I guess.
But I think the words are right.
Yeah.
This one doesn't deliver, in part because Gwen's conflict with her father is so, it's like, oh no, that's a problem. Your father, the cop just finds out you, who he's always kind of thought was a vigilante, and now a murderer is also his daughter. Well, that's the... Well, and then she walks through a portal. That's the parental
Yeah.
There's child parental tension.
It's not my
and Miles and his parents don't provide comic relief to that.
No.
They're just theirs, in contrast, is not even tension breaking. It's just like a noodle. It's like, can we go back to Gwen? That was interesting and kind of scary.
Well, when you take a look at these two movies, I think the thing you're looking at, whether they're playing with the whole idea of canon, is they're fun. You know, visually they're fun. The interdimensional characters are fun. The pace is fun. They're playing around with things and ideas and that kind of thing. Is all fun. And then you sort of like it's such a sort of almost a typical ingredient to have this family tension, and that's not fun. It's just sort of like, break, needle scratch, break, squeal, that kind of thing. I thought that moved not very well in the movie. My other thing, which happened now twice, I think, is that a figure that's gone to attend a person who is either dead or dying is automatically fingered as being the murderer, which is one of the things I hate the least. There's no forensics, there's no stabbing motion, there's no gun being shot. It's just like, you're in close proximity to a body, ergo you're the one who murdered them. I know it. And it's happened twice now. And I just, it's such a cheap gag. But I can forgive it. It's they're doing okay with the rest of the movie.
I mean, I'm okay. It is a cheap trope, though.
Yeah.
They could have come up with something better, like at least put the murder weapon in her hand or something, right? Yeah.
But there's one thing I wanted to ask you, actually, is that I was sort of on Twitter a little bit, and this may be a little bit reactionary or what, but it got me thinking. Somebody really read into color palettes and that kind of thing, and there's a scene, I guess, with Gwen, and she was bathed in police siren light, and I was just wondering, there's cops, both the fathers are policemen, in such a sort of a counterculture, or a movie that professes to be a little bit counterculture. Is this approaching a kind of a propaganda a little bit?
Notwithstanding the fact that there's a protect trans kids thing in her room, and a BLM button.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is propaganda. It's always, no, these are the good cops. And even she has a great line, which I get why they have it in there, but it's like, well, here's some more propaganda, where she says, I know why you put on that uniform, why you have this badge, because otherwise the wrong people will get it. And it's like, no.
It's sort of like
rest
Jack
assured,
Nicholson.
There's plenty of them there.
a few good men that, these are the guys that stand on the wall, and that kind of thing. But,
exactly. It isn't, and you could say, going back to the lazy trope, I mean, that's a lazy trope, but cop jumps to conclusion on minimal evidence. That is the story of everyone who's been convicted and exonerated later. It's like, look at this.
Yeah.
Tunnel blindness from the police and prosecutors. To
Also,
the point where they're hiding from everyone, including themselves, evidence that disproved their theory and exonerated the person they ran into jail and fought every step of the way to continue to hide the evidence so that guy could stay in jail.
And then on the other hand, you have the unsolved crimes, and it's we didn't want to share our info with the neighboring town because they didn't buy me a beer once or something.
Or they can say, well, we know who did it. Do ya? Well, no, we closed it. We know who did it. Just because we couldn't convict him. It's like, Because
Yeah.
you don't know. Yeah.
But,
Oh well.
yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I agree with you, Jim. It's not the most egregious version.
No.
It's yeah. But it is. It's the nature of superhero movies. They are crime movies, and I mean, I've yet to see a true working class superhero. Although I could imagine. I can imagine one, be a lot more, at least in the Canadian context, indigenous. Yes, they'd be dealing with neighborhood criminals, but involved in restorative justice. I'm going to take you to the town granny who's going to make sure you do what's right. Like prison would not be the first, oh, look, I tied him up and dumped him on the police doorstep. Yeah. An actual working class hero would be, no, we're not. That just compounds the problem.
Yeah.
And would have somebody, and this is myself, if I ever made that comic book, there would be his, let's say maybe not his sidekick, but definitely an ally called Fat White Bureaucrat, who would, whenever trying to help the community, would be, how do we navigate the structural impediments to actual community empowerment? And you got to, you know what, until the revolution comes, you need somebody on the inside to help you, Here, that superhero would have a guy called Fat White Bureaucrat.
That's good.
Would be brought in every now and then when the community needed help, but mostly would be involved in, and every now and then thrown white collar criminals in jail. Mm-hmm. Like there's a working class superhero.
Yes,
that's a working class superhero. Sleazy bankers crushing communities into the clink.
Exactly.
Fraud artists, all those criminals, all those white collar bureaucratic criminals. All right.
Yeah.
Jim, gonna jump into the chat one more time. Jelly Duck 100.
Oh, hey. By the way, I forgot to say hi to Walter.
Great seeing you here, Jelly Duck. DMG says so many Spider-Men. You're right. Like, it's a lot. Peak Spider-Men. Peak Spider heroes. There we go. DMG says he really liked about Spidey, there was the self-aware thing. He liked that meta commentary about the passing away when one gets to the rank of captain and how Miles wants to save his dad. I'm not sure what he means by, but wasn't worried about it before. Maybe if you can elaborate on that, DMG, that'd be great. Then he goes, really missed Adam Carolla's Spider Pig as comic relief. I know. Missed Spider Pig. Missed the film noir Spider-Man, Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
But they were all, when she got the original band back together, like another kind of leitmotif, that idea of a band and am I fitting into the band? And, and then she gets her real band together where she's the leader of the band.
And she never fit in before, but
now she's going to rescue her princess.
Yeah.
Miles. Sticking with that. All right. Okay, Jim. Let's there is more meat on this bone, but we don't have all night.
It's a school night.
It is a school night. Why don't you give us your final thoughts on this?
Sure. Just looking at my notes and what I hadn't brought up. I think one of the things that has a really nice sense of place, I'm planning a New York trip later this summer and been researching and that sort of thing. And the Myrtle Avenue Station is one that they showed for a second, and it's there in the movie. So I think got a nice sense of Brooklyn on its own without necessarily leaning on New York there. But no, just I think this is like almost a new kind of demand that movies have. This one I think needs to. I have a bit of a handicap here because I have only seen it once, whereas you've seen it twice, and I think a couple of other the commentators have seen it, and my son's seen it twice now too. So, yeah, definitely have to go see it again. But yeah, I should mention. I love the South Asian, the Mumbattan. Was that what it was called? I love that whole segment.
Oh yeah, with the Mumbai-esque.
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought that was just. I could have watched that if they made that into a movie.
And it's a key turning point where we start to understand Gwen more, and
not just for effect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, that was good, and I thought that Spot was a good, a fairly good villain. Jason Schwartzman again. We mentioned before, but I thought he did a great job, and I like how he's drawn. He was just a little bit sort of off kilter.
Yeah,
like he was never straight. His body was always sort of like contorted a little bit,
verging on horror, but not.
Yeah. A little bit of Cronenberg in there, perhaps, but I like.
I'm thinking more like The Thin Man, like some of these references. First of all, DMG does clarify. He says he wasn't worried about his dad before, but then he learns about canon.
Yeah,
he has been shown the Bible, and it's like, oh, I got to worry about this now. Oh my goodness, my dad's been promoted to captain. It adds like a ticking clock to it and everything. Yeah, okay. Understand now. Thanks, DMG, for that clarification.
Thank you.
Myself, for me, I want to talk about Spot 2. And I'm gonna go way out on a limb as far as predictions go.
Okay.
He tonally, like a lot of Spider-Man villains, there's almost always some sort of human rationale for the way they are. They're rarely, at least not the big ones, are rarely just, well, I don't know, I woke up and I wanted to do evil things. Mm-hmm. There is a backstory to them. There's some sort of tragedy. And while I don't think it was handled well in this film, there's a part of me, because the tone between those two is comic. And in part because Spot doesn't, he's like, listen, this is all I can do. I'm not stealing this machine isn't yours. It belongs to the bank. Like, he's a sympathetic character at the beginning and kind of funny and a little clowny in that. I don't think it was handled well, his turn, but I think the reason they give it that tone is that in the next movie, here's my prediction, he ends up switching sides as, I can't remember I guess he's from a planet of ninja vampires because that's a thing. The Spider-Man.
Oh, Miguel.
Miguel, thank you.
The
Miguel.
Oscar Isaac one, yeah.
Where he goes full villain.
Okay.
And Spot is the one that switches side and helps out. Because Miguel, thematically, I think is a better villain. Mm-hmm. No, he's an obstacle, but he kind of goes kind of villainy, and he'll be full villain in the next movie. But also a tragic backstory. Like, you're not going, he was just born evil. It's because he's a ninja vampire.
Yeah.
Whatever the hell that is. Although, mind you, I've been doing a lot of reading up on some of these. I've been following comic tropes, folks. Mm-hmm. Follow comic tropes. I will be buying it probably right after this show. There is a comic book called Vampironica. It's set in an alternate universe, in the Archie and Friends universe.
Oh my God.
An alternate one where she becomes a vampire.
Sure.
And I'm like,
You're in.
I'm up for that. And that's, I kind of think though, like it comes back to what we're talking about, that maybe in this movie is this idea of questioning canon, breaking it up a little. Like, why can't we have something different? It was one of the things that I found exciting and interesting about Rian Johnson's swing at the Star Wars sequels was, it's like, well, at least somebody's trying something different. You know, we got a rehash of the first one, beat for beat. Boring.
Yeah.
And then the last one, kind of a just an absolute load of fan service and just, woof. So all of a sudden this middle film that the fans hated, and I was like, at least, I don't know if it totally worked for me, but somebody's trying something. I'm okay with that. Yeah. So there you go. That's my feelings on this, folks. DMG says, a villain changing sides? What is this, a Fast and Furious movie?
Zing.
You know what? I think that actually happens a fair bit where Spider-Man's villains, like Doc Ock, probably one of the greats, where he's like
Alfred Molina, the live action one.
He always kind of at the end sort of, I have to sacrifice myself. And one of the great moments of the No Way Home was when the aunt's talking about, Liam, what the hell is his name? Anyways, the Osborn, the Green Goblin.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, look at him. He is mentally ill. This is a tragic man who deserves our sympathy. And I think that's a great, so that seems to fit Spider-Man. And something worth keeping, that sympathy for these villains that you don't necessarily see in other superhero movies.
Yeah,
they're most always just villains.
They're not very General Zoddy or jokery or
Zack Snyder's approach to villainy. All right, everybody.
Sure.
I want to thank you all very much. First of all, beg you one more time for a like and subscribe. And, of course, subscribe down there. There'll be some nonsense this way that you can watch, over there. And, yes, ring the bell.
The neglected, dust-covered bell.
Good night, everybody.
Thwip, thwip.